Alright, so guys, I'm coming to you from, well, my basement, as you can tell. Kind of down here with my dog Hunter, who is stinky and wet. Also, right here where my hiking and camping stuff is, mainly because I want to kind of show you guys something. I was thinking about it earlier. I was kind of playing with my ropes and knots, and those of you that know me know that I love to hike, backpack, camp, whatever. I also like to rappel. And one of the key essential things when rappel is knots. And one of the knots that it really is the most important one that we use is the figure 8 on a bight. And this is an important knot because, well, it's our anchor. It's the one that's going to hold us to whatever we are trying to come off of, whether it's a ledge or whatever. And we usually use this knot in conjunction with a bunch of other things, but the knot itself is the most important, mainly because it kind of holds strength. It holds strength even though it's tied. Most knots, when they break back against a rope, as you can see my rope here, this is my personal rescue rope out of my firefighter gear, which is also very important that we use. Really good rope that holds a lot of strength, and we also use this figure 8 on a bight that holds its strength even though it's a knot, because most knots, like I said just a second ago, they kind of, when they bite back on itself, it kind of loses the strength or messes with the strength of the rope. So the key thing about the figure 8 on a bight is it doesn't. Now I'm going to show you guys kind of what this knot looks like. Talk about the different pieces of the knot, so that way hopefully you guys can tie it. But I'm hoping that you will also get something else out of this that you're going to see here in just a second that I'm going to explain. But the first one is you have a rope. This is about 8mm cord. I think the strength on it is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 pounds, something like that, as far as strength. And that's important to keep because your body weight plus any kind of shock load, sudden fall or hard and sudden stop can exceed, some ropes. So that's why we use this rope. Anyways, one of the key mechanics of the knot is called a bight. It's a figure 8 on a bight. A bight is just a bend in a rope. It's not a circular motion, but just a bend, and this is the bend here. So this would be the bight. And that bend or that bight is kind of significant in other manners too, as it's making kind of a 180. And I'm going to kind of talk to you guys about another 180 in life, which is Christ. It kind of helps us do a 180 in life. So that's kind of important, but wait for just a minute because I'm going to be coming back to that. But this 180 in the knot, okay, in the rope here, so it makes your bight right there. Kind of makes this, not looping across itself, but just a bight. Alright? Now you're going to take this bight and it kind of comes down and around itself. It comes around itself once. This down and around itself once is good because it makes it strong, but this knot not only does that, but it comes around itself twice, only to go back through into a hole and to emerge as a figure 8 on a bight. Kind of makes like a figure 8 kind of symbol. And what this does, instead of kind of breaking the rope back on itself like a break, instead it bends around itself so that way it pulls the tensile strength all the way through, so the strength of the knot and the rope is not compromised, which makes a great anchor. And this is why we use it as an anchor in climbing and rappelling. It's like I said, it's one of the most used forms of a knot. Now I'm going to get a little deeper in what I was saying before about the bight, about Christ and your life doing a 180, because there's another anchor in our life. There's another thing in our life, and that's Christ. That's Jesus. Because He is an anchor. He was sent by God to be our anchor in life and in death for eternity. Now see, this is how He works. I want to read you a passage. Alright, this passage is from Hebrews. Hebrews 6, and it's 13 through 19. Alright, so we go into, it's talking about this promise that was made to Abraham. For example, there was God's promise to Abraham, since there was no greater to swear by. God took an oath on his own name. And he says, I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond numbers. Then Abraham waited patiently and received God's promise. Now, when people take an oath, they call on some greater thing other than themselves to hold on to it. And without any question that this oath is binding. So because we call upon God, we say we're going to swear by God or take an oath by God, it gives it that greater meaning. Now in 17, it says, God also bound himself with an oath so that those who receive this promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. He's not a liar. God's not a liar. So God has given us this promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because God cannot lie. Therefore, we who have fled to him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor. Key there, anchor for our soul. Let me get on my dog here. Come here, Hunter. Come here. So this hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls that leads us through the curtain into God's sanctuary. Okay, now I know this is kind of confusing. I kind of went slow on that and talked in and out of the passage there. But basically what it's saying is God has a promise, all right, that ends up being his anchor. And what he's talking about there is your salvation. And the meaning of salvation that he's talking about is Jesus. Okay, now see, in Romans 3:23, it says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Everyone has fallen. Alright, now, we need a lifeline. God knew this, and he built this into his plan. Alright, so with that lifeline, he put it in himself. He kind of took a piece of himself, put it down in this earth, in the form of his Son, in order to be that anchor for us. Now see, when I think of this knot, I think of Jesus, and I think of him as God gave him to us. We took him and we bent him. We made a bite. And then through life, he was wrapped around himself and twice, and into death, he emerged as an anchor. You see, we took that anchor and we wrapped that anchor on a tree, on a dogwood tree. Now, I wouldn't anchor to a dogwood tree nowadays, but that's because God changed the tree after we did that. It used to be a nice, strong, sturdy tree like an oak, but now it's weak. And it moves and bends and is not a good anchor point. But then it was. So we took our anchor that God gave us in Jesus, and we didn't just tie him onto that tree. We didn't just tie that anchor on there. We nailed the anchor to that tree, thinking it would hold. And God allowed us to do that. Alright? We kind of abused that anchor. We beat that anchor and bashed that anchor until it bled. But that anchor had a purpose. That anchor stood there on that tree, bearing the weight of all that have fallen and all that have fell short of the glory of God, all of us that have sinned. It held that weight. And it held that weight until a point when the earth cracked. And he said it was finished. The earth just split. And all the weight was bared onto that anchor for us. Now, we took that anchor off after we were done with it. We took it off that tree. And we took it down and put it in what we thought was a safe place. In a tomb. With a door, if you think of a safe, kind of a door that shuts and is meant to be shut for a long time. Unless somebody opens it from the outside, not to be opened from the inside. But see, we left it in that safe place. And we came back and that anchor was gone. It was no longer there. Not because one of us had removed it, but because it took itself out. Because, see, that anchor wasn't done. That anchor wasn't finished. That anchor still had purpose, meaning. That anchor didn't like the tree it was on because it wasn't strong enough. That anchor wanted to make a better hold. So that anchor went and prepared a place for us. It went to prepare itself to hold on to a place so it could use its strong arm to hold us in life through anything that we could imagine to go through. Now see, this is where the anchor comes in handy. It's going to catch us when we fall. It's going to catch us anywhere that we go, no matter what you're into, no matter what your downfall is, no matter what's pulling you down to the ground. You always have that anchor that holds you into place. And that anchor is Christ. And see, that anchor, it doesn't cost the money that this rope cost. There's no price on this. There's nothing that you can buy that will give you that anchor. There's only one thing that God asks, and this is so awesome, because all He asks that you believe. That's it. That you believe that God sent a piece of Himself down to this earth in the form of His Son, Jesus Christ, and that He died for our sins, and 3 days later rose again in order for us to have life eternally with God. See, God didn't want to be separated from us. He didn't want to not have conversations and love and sharing. He wanted to have all that. It was our fault that we were separated. It was our fault. For He gave us free will. And we chose to betray Him. And we chose to leave Him. Now see, the penalty of that sin is death. And that debt had to be paid. So Jesus Christ Himself, God sent a piece of Himself. I can't say that more than enough. It's a piece of God to earth to pay that price for all of us. By being that anchor on that tree, holding the sin of the world, paying that price for all of us. And after we put a crown of thorns on Him, after we pierced His flesh with a whip, after we just beat Him uncontrollably, placed Him on a cross, pierced His wrist with nails, and then demanded His blood to be spilt on that ground, He still loved us enough to carry that burden and to be that anchor. And the only thing He demands from us is for us to believe in that. For us to believe in Him. That's why I'm making this video. It's not so I can show you guys how to make a figure 8 on a bite. I could do that in person. It's more to relate to you guys how important it is that because we can't live this life without Him, because all we're going to do is fall, that it's important for us to have that anchor and believe. All you have to do is believe. He is the anchor that holds. He's the anchor there for our soul. And He is all we need.